Welcome back to Focus Today. We have a great guest who's going to put some things in perspective that you've probably been hearing all sorts of questions about and answers, and you're wondering, can I believe them or not? Well, we've got the answer man. Gary Bauer is with us. He's the president of American Values. Thanks for being with us by phone today.
My pleasure to be with you.
Give a brief overview. We know that, of course, you have run for president, and how long ago was that?
In 2000.
2000.
And, obviously, I was a long shot candidate, and George Bush ultimately got that nomination and went on to be a great president for 8 years. But I did get in the race in 2000, tried to promote a set of conservative values, including pro-life and pro-family and religious liberty.
Well, I think it certainly shows that for a long time you've been in the public foray of wanting to make an influence that way. American Values, I suppose that's another extension, really. For those people who don't know about your organization, give us just a brief rundown. What is the goal?
American Values is a public policy group in Washington, D.C. We work with members of Congress and the media, very challenging job. To try to defend conservative values. I just spent yesterday up on Capitol Hill meeting with dozens of members of Congress on these issues. We also have several political action committees that only support pro-life and pro-family candidates.
All right, great. Well, this is good to have you on today because what we're getting is a fresh perspective of something that's been in the news for a while. Let's talk about the sequester, which is a new term. I don't know if they're going to add that to the dictionary in a whole new definition after this time period or not. But the basic aspect is that our federal budget is going to be cut, not in any particular way that anyone would have chosen, but across the board. And we're hearing a lot of people saying this is a terrible thing. But Gary, I got to tell you, there's some people who are saying, wait a minute, didn't we need to cut the budget anyway? Is this any worse than any other way? What is your perspective on this whole aspect of cutting, what is it, $86 million from the budget? Is that right?
86 billion, right?
That is, yeah.
Yeah, leave it to Washington, right, to come up with a name that nobody's ever heard of before for something that's pretty run-of-the-mill. I mean, if you work for a business, if you have your own family, people understand what a budget is. You can only spend ultimately over a long period of time what you take in. The United States government, unfortunately, for many years has been spending more than it takes in, and that has accelerated in the first 4 years of the Obama presidency. In fact, every year under President Obama, we have spent $1 trillion more than we have taken in. And we will do that again in the year that we're in right now.
Well, so what is your view on this? Is this a terrible thing or not to have the sequestration come in if they don't change it by Friday?
No, it's not a terrible thing. I'm very upset about the cynicism that the White House is showing right now. What they're doing is, and I don't say this lightly, instead of cutting out waste and cutting out fraud and cutting out the fat in the budget, and this budget cut, by the way, is only 3.5%, three pennies out of a dollar. Instead, they are taking the cuts in the worst possible places. The president is. Nothing in this budget cut requires him to do that. He is choosing to lay off people. Yesterday, releasing thousands of jailed illegal immigrants, cutting food programs, all of which is engendered, is aimed at panicking conservatives in Congress and making them cancel the budget cuts and instead raising taxes again. That's the president's goal and agenda here. It's very cynical. I've never seen any president, Republican or Democrat, play this kind of game before, but there is absolutely no doubt factually that is what he's doing.
Let me ask you about, since you're talking to people on Capitol Hill there and all the rest, John Boehner, the House Speaker, Is he coming across with any gravitas to make his point? Are people listening to it, or are they hearing him and saying, forget it, I don't believe you? Because he's been saying, you know what, this is a time for cuts. We've given you your taxes, now we have to cut. It doesn't seem to be gaining much traction, though, is it?
Well, it doesn't. But see, this is the problem that anybody that's a conservative in Washington has. If you believe in smaller government, lower taxes, and even more so if you're also pro-life and pro-family, the media presents you in the worst possible light. In contrast, if you want bigger government, higher taxes, you're pro-abortion, you want to change the definition of marriage, the media gives you every opportunity. It overlooks your mistakes. It even corrects them. We just found out today that ABC News took an interview with the First Lady in which she made a statement about guns that was factually not true, and they edited the sentence. They literally took out the middle part of her sentence so that she would not be caught saying something that was either a lie or a very big error. They would never do that with a conservative that misspoke. So I know conservatives around the country are frustrated, but they need to understand that the playing field is very tilted in Washington, D.C. The media is almost acting like a government-controlled media, and they're much harder on somebody like John Boehner than they are on Senator Harry Reid that leads the Democrats that control the Senate, or than they are on President Obama and his appointees.
You know, I find that it appears a lot of conservatives are somewhat scratching their heads saying, you know what, the rules have changed and I don't know how to adapt to it. What advice would you give to, or maybe you are giving to those on Capitol Hill about what needs to be done so that, as you're talking about these, not just misconceptions, but manipulations, stop and people find out really what's happening and get a wellspring of support against the injustice they see happening? What are you telling conservatives to do at this point?
Well, two things. First of all, to not abandon conservatism. That would be the worst thing they could do. They're not going to get any credit for doing that. In fact, it'll be seen as a sign of weakness, and the liberal side will attack even more strongly, sensing that weakness. And then second of all, we all know, any conservative in Washington knows about the media bias, and we're urging conservatives in Congress and in the Republican Party, unfortunately, we're urging that they have to raise money to literally buy their position and put it on television. In other words, if ABC and CBS and NBC and CNN and MSNBC won't report the truth, then our side is going to have to spend money to buy ads to tell the American people the truth. That, again, puts us at a terrible disadvantage, but I don't know any other thing that can be done in order to try to even the playing field. Do
you think we'll be seeing more of that? I mean, it is deep pockets that take that, but is that possible?
I think there's a move toward that, but whether they can do it on every issue like this current sequester or not remains to be seen.
Are you surprised, after having been in politics for so long, to see the United States, I'd say, moving in that direction where there is no rational dialogue? It seems to be all knee-jerk reactions to what I feel, and I deserve government money and all the rest. Does any of this surprise you, the culmination we've come to at this point?
You know, I must admit to being a little surprised. I felt that in the recent decade or so, even among a lot of liberals, there was a sense that the country can't just keep spending. You'll remember that Bill Clinton, the Democratic president, said the era of big government is over. The current administration is absolutely committed to getting as many people dependent on government as possible. They're literally traveling around the country right now trying to gin up more people to sign up for food stamps, to sign up for welfare. They took the work requirement out of welfare. These are really radical positions, but the average American, even now, doesn't understand that these things are being done.
You know, we've had a lot of guests on who have alluded to the premise that the president doesn't really have the best interests. There's an agenda that goes beyond something we've never seen before of a socialistic nature. Dinesh D'Souza has written books. We've had him on as well, kind of alluding to that when you look at his past history of the president. I'm not sure. I'd be interested to know how far you would want to go in what you see as that kind of an agenda, and whether that is happening right now. Do you see that happening?
You know, I always try to be very careful on this because I don't want to make wild charges which end up alienating Americans in the middle that we're still trying to win over to our side. But I saw something this morning that raised my eyebrows. I don't know how many of your listeners will recognize the name Bob Woodward.
Oh, yeah.
Here in Washington, he's a famous Washington Post reporter. Washington Post is very liberal. Mr. Woodward is very liberal. He was one of the main reporters that brought down President Nixon for the Watergate scandal. Bob Woodward on TV this morning, commenting on President Obama, pointed out that President Obama, a week or so ago, refused to send another aircraft carrier to the Persian Gulf, where we desperately need another one because we don't know how close Iran is to getting a nuclear weapon. And when the president refused to do this, he cited the budget cuts as the reason that he couldn't send this aircraft carrier. That's just absurd. I mean, there's all kinds of fat in the Pentagon that can be cut without doing something that would hurt our national security. But what jumped out at me was that Bob Woodward, this liberal reporter, said this is a kind of madness, referring to President Obama, that I have not seen in Washington in a long, long time. When I hear liberals beginning to say those sorts of things about our president, that makes me sit up and take notice that we may be dealing with something quite different than anything we've dealt with before.
Well, Gary, it's great to have you kind of in the middle of that, to be able to give us the perspective of what you're seeing on Capitol Hill and all that. And I hope we have you back with more on that. I wanted to ask a real brief question, though, about the new Secretary of Defense we have, which is probably one of the most controversial Secretary of Defense nominations we've ever had. A Republican that only 4 Republicans voted for. He is now Chuck Hagel, former senator, in that position. What are your thoughts about that? Is it going to make any difference to have him or anyone else in that position?
Total disaster. No Secretary of Defense has ever had more than 11 votes cast against him. Senator Hagel yesterday had 41 votes out of 100 senators cast against him. He is weak on Iran, he is hostile to Israel, and he wants to gut the Pentagon budget. That is a witch's brew of positions, and I am deeply worried about our national security in the months and years ahead.
Really? So you think that this will directly impact our national security, you're saying?
No question about it. I think there will be nobody now to counter the president's instincts, which are to gut the defense budget. His previous Secretary of Defense has argued against that. This Secretary of Defense will demand even more cuts, I think, than the president will want to make. Wow.
Gary, thanks for being with us. I realize this was very quick. Yeah. President of American Values, what's your website?
OurAmericanValues.org.
And they can find out more about what your group is about and everything else.
Absolutely.
So terrific. Thanks for being with us on Focus
My pleasure.
today.
Take care.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Gary Bauer, our guest, thank you for joining us as well. And tell your friends about Focus today, right here on theDove.